You wake up one day and realize you can't keep pretending anymore. The laughter around you sounds rehearsed. The small talk feels painfully hollow. The mask you've worn for years starts to feel like it's suffocating you. You're not sad, not even angry. You're just done. Done performing, done explaining, done trying to make yourself fit where you no longer belong. And that's when something deeper begins to stir. Carl Jung called this the quiet breaking point of the human spirit, the beginning of individuation. Awakening isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself with thunder. It begins softly, quietly, like a slow refusal to keep betraying yourself, just to belong. Today, we're going to explore the subtle, almost invisible things that spiritually awakened people quietly stop doing, not out of rebellion, but because their soul literally can't play the old games anymore. You start noticing it slowly, the exhaustion that comes every time you smile when you don't mean it, the quiet tension that builds in your chest when you apologize for simply existing, and the strange guilt that follows when you finally say no. For years, your life revolved around approval. You shaped your personality like clay, molding it to fit whoever was in front of you. You softened your opinions, you dimmed your light, you traded truth for belonging, until one day, your body just stopped cooperating. Carl Jung called this moment the death of the persona. The persona is the mask we build and wear to survive, the polite, pleasing, polished version of us that wins acceptance from the world. But the problem is, when you live through that mask for too long, you start to forget the face underneath. Awakening begins when the mask becomes unbearable, when saying what people want to hear physically hurts, when the words get stuck in your throat, when your body refuses to fake agreement. One of Jung's patients once said something haunting. I used to rearrange my whole personality depending on who I was with. Now, when I try, it feels like my soul hits the brakes. That's what happens during awakening. You don't decide to stop people-pleasing. It's that your soul simply stops letting you. It starts rejecting fake harmony, the way the body rejects poison. And yes, it's lonely at first, because when you stop performing, some people disappear. But here's the strange beauty of it. For the first time, the people who remain see you, not your persona. That's the beginning of individuation, not perfection, but truth. At first, you resist it. You try to meditate it away, rationalize it away, drown it in positivity, but the darkness doesn't leave. It just waits. Then one day, you stop running, you sit there, in the quiet, and you finally let it speak. The sadness, the jealousy, the anger, the grief, all those emotions you were told to suppress, start to rise like forgotten children begging to be seen. Carl Jung called this the shadow, the hidden side of the psyche that contains everything we deny about ourselves. Not evil, not broken, just unlived. And Jung believed that true awakening begins not when you find the light, but when you turn and face your own darkness. For years you might have believed being spiritual meant being calm, pure, forgiving, but now you see it. That wasn't spirituality. That was avoidance wrapped in light. Jung warned that what we repress doesn't disappear. It waits. And when we finally have the courage to face it, it doesn't destroy us. It frees us. You start realizing anger isn't unspiritual. It's a signal. Sadness isn't weakness. It's truth trying to breathe. And the tears that once felt like failure start feeling like medicine. The moment you stop rejecting your shadow, it stops controlling you. You no longer have to wear the mask of constant calm. You're allowed to be messy, contradictory, human, and strangely, that honesty feels holier than perfection ever did. You notice the impulse at first, the urge to explain, to send the perfect video, to drop the quote that will finally make them see you love them, you want them to wake up, and you believe if you just say it right, they'll understand. But the harder you try, the more they shut down, and the more you feel unseen, unheard, and exhausted. Carl Jung warned about this moment. He called it spiritual inflation. It happens when a real glimpse of truth convinces the ego it knows better than others. You don't mean to be superior, but the tone slips in. Let me fix you sneaks into your words. And people can feel it, even when your intentions are pure. Awakening softens this reflex. Slowly, quietly, you start recognizing projection. The parts of you you're trying to repair in them. You notice the urgency is yours, the discomfort is yours, and you remember what Jung taught again and again. Transformation comes from the inside out, never from force. So you do something radically simple. You stop trying to wake everyone up. You stop debating online. You stop sending unsolicited advice. You stop turning dinners into interventions. Instead, you practice a different kind of love, the kind that trusts timing, respects boundaries, asks, "Would you like my perspective?" and accepts no with grace. At first it feels like betrayal, like silence equals abandonment, but then you notice something quiet and beautiful. People feel safer around you. They open on their own, not because you pushed, but because you listened. Your presence starts doing what your arguments never could. Jung would say this is individuation maturing, the ego stepping back so the self can lead. Humility replaces urgency. Curiosity replaces preaching. Compassion replaces control. You realize it is not your job to drag anyone into the light. Your only job is to keep tending your own. And here's the paradox, and the moment you stop trying to change people, your life starts changing people. Not with pressure, but with peace. Not with speeches, but with example. Sometimes that's what finally reaches them. There comes a time when the endless search for purpose starts to feel heavier than it feels hopeful. You used to wake up each morning asking, what's my calling? What's my mission? What am I meant to do? And for a while, chasing that question gave you direction, something to live for. But eventually, the chase itself becomes the trap. Carl Jung saw this pattern in countless patients. People desperate to find meaning because they were terrified of feeling lost. He called it the tyranny of purpose, a psychological defense against the unbearable mystery of simply being alive. You begin to sense it, that your obsession with finding meaning was really an attempt to control life. You thought, if you could define your path, you could finally relax. But life isn't a puzzle to solve. It's an experience to live. Slowly, you stop forcing meaning into everything. You stop asking, what does this mean? And start asking, what is this showing me right now? You stop trying to manifest purpose and start allowing purpose to reveal itself through presence. Jung believed that when you stop hunting for purpose, something miraculous happens. Your unconscious begins to speak. Dreams, coincidences, small moments of beauty, they start whispering direction. Not loud, not dramatic, but quietly, consistently, like a compass beneath the noise. You realize your worth doesn't depend on being useful. That purpose isn't something to achieve, it's something to embody. A teacher washing dishes can be fulfilling their destiny. A parent playing with their child can be living their soul's mission. You no longer need the universe to hand you a job description. You start trusting that meaning is woven into every breath, every silence, every ordinary day, and that realization changes everything. You don't need to chase purpose anymore, because now, purpose is quietly chasing you. You've probably felt it, that strange pressure to look fine, to sound positive, to keep smiling even when something inside you is breaking. It's the silent rule of a culture obsessed with happiness. But one day, something in you snaps. You stop performing peace and start craving truth. Carl Jung saw this shift again and again. He said real spirituality doesn't make people permanently serene. It makes them profoundly real. And reality includes everything, the joy and the grief, the calm and the chaos. To be whole, you have to hold it all. At first, it feels like failure. You catch yourself crying more often, speaking more honestly, saying, I'm not okay without guilt. And part of you worries, am I regressing? I thought awakening meant I'd rise above pain. But Jung warned that repressing emotion in the name of enlightenment is just another mask, the spiritual persona, a clever disguise the ego wears to look evolved. When you stop forcing happiness, you make space for authenticity. Your laughter stops sounding practiced. Your tears stop feeling wrong. You discover that the soul doesn't need constant light. It needs integration. The dark moments are where depth grows. One of Jung's clients once said, "After years of chasing joy, I realized I was scared of my own sadness and that fear kept me shallow." That's when she began to heal. Not by escaping her darkness, but by sitting with it until it no longer frightened her. And here's the paradox. The moment you stop trying to be happy, a quieter, steadier happiness starts appearing on its own. Not the kind that sparkles for the camera, but the kind that stays with you when the world goes quiet. Because now, happiness isn't the goal anymore. It's just the natural fragrance of a life finally lived in truth. There's a moment when the story starts to crumble, the one where you're the victim and someone else is the villain. For years, that story gave you comfort. It made the pain feel organized. It gave the chaos a name. But one day, you look at it and realize it's keeping you small. Carl Jung wrote that the psyche has a deep instinct for wholeness, and as long as we keep projecting blame outward, we fragment ourselves. We split the world into good and evil, innocent and guilty. But the truth is far more complicated and far more liberating. You begin to notice patterns, different faces, same lessons, different relationships, same wounds, and something inside whispers, what if it's not just them? What if this is something I keep recreating? It's a painful realization, but it's the beginning of freedom, because blame feels like control, but it's actually a cage. It keeps you tied to what hurt you. Jung observed this in countless patients. Once they stopped blaming others, they could finally see their own unconscious participation, not to take the fault, but to take back their power. You start to understand. The people who hurt you were mirrors. They showed you what still lived unhealed within you, and while their actions weren't justified, your reaction became your teacher. You stop waiting for apologies that may never come. You stop trying to rewrite the past, and you begin rewriting your relationship to it. The ego sees this as surrender, but the soul knows its sovereignty, because the day you stop blaming is the day you stop handing your power away. And that's when healing truly begins, not because they changed, but because you did. In the beginning, awakening can feel like isolation. You look around and see people chasing things that no longer interest you. You talk, but the words don't land. You listen, but the noise feels endless. You start to believe you've outgrown the world, that consciousness comes with loneliness. Carl Jung understood this phase deeply. He said that when the ego begins dissolving, the individual feels like an exile, caught between worlds. You're no longer fully part of the unconscious crowd, but not yet anchored in your deeper self. And that space in between, it feels like being invisible. So you withdraw, not out of arrogance, but out of self-preservation. You need quiet, solitude, space to rebuild the inner architecture that once depended on approval and noise. But eventually, the silence starts teaching you something unexpected. You begin to feel the faint hum of connection everywhere, in the trees, in the wind, in the strangers passing by. Jung called this expansion of consciousness the movement toward the self. It's when the boundaries between me and them begin to soften. You realize that the same fears, the same desires, the same confusion that live in you also live in everyone else. The superiority fades. The need to prove your awareness fades. You stop labeling others as asleep or unawakened. You see they're simply at a different chapter in the same vast book. One woman told Jung, "I thought I was lonely because no one was awake. Now I see I was lonely because I'd forgotten." We're all the same soul, wearing different faces. That's the final transformation. Awakening doesn't separate you from the world. It binds you to it through compassion. You stop judging, you start understanding, you stop distancing, you start belonging, because the more awakened you become, the less separate you feel, until finally, there's no you and them anymore, only us. You notice the habit first, asking someone else what you already know, checking a chart, a test, a guru, and algorithms before you trust your gut, refreshing the feed for a sign, instead of listening to the sign inside. Carl Jung warned about this pattern. He called it transference, handing our inner authority to an outer figure, projecting the self onto teachers, systems, even truth influencers, useful for a time, but dangerous when it replaces direct knowing. Awakening flips a quiet switch. You still learn, you still value guidance, but you stop outsourcing decisions to anything outside your soul. You begin asking, would I choose this if no one approved? You notice where projection was doing the driving, the mentor you needed to save you, the system you wanted to make you certain, the sign you demanded before taking one honest step. Jung called the maturing compass inner authority. It's not defiance, it's alignment. You consult the map, but you let the self steer. You honor synchronicity, but you quit forcing omens to do your will. So you practice tiny acts of sovereignty, choosing the quieter voice, letting maybe breathe, instead of wrestling a yes or no from fear. You stop building altars to other people's certainty, and you start building trust with your own. Here's the surprise. Life becomes simpler, not easier, but clearer, because the moment you stop outsourcing your intuition, your choices stop sounding like arguments and start feeling like home. It happens slowly. You start noticing how the highs come with hangovers, how the late night confessions, the cliff edge argument, the make-up miracles leave you empty the next morning, and you realize what felt like chemistry was often just chaos dressed as love. Carl Jung would call this projection at work. The anima animus, the inner feminine or masculine image, gets thrown onto someone else. Suddenly they carry your longing, your wound, your fantasy of being saved. It feels destined, but it's really your unconscious asking to be seen. At first, you keep chasing sparks, because sparks feel like proof. This is real, but awakening teaches a quieter metric. If your nervous system is terrified, it isn't intimacy, it's inflammation. So you begin to choose differently. You choose the person who feels safe over the person who feels stormy. The conversation that is clear over the one that is clever. The rhythm that is sustainable over the story that is cinematic. Jung said, we don't so much solve our projections as we withdraw them. You start owning what you are outsourcing, my need to be chosen, my fear of abandonment, my hunger for awe. You bring these home to the self, and something miraculous happens. The ocean calms without going shallow. You learn that consistency is a love language, that boredom is often a nervous system finally feeling safe, that silence can be connection. When both hearts are present, one day you notice you're no longer addicted to the roller coaster. You don't need a hero or a hurricane. You want a human, and you're willing to be one too. This is individuation in relationship. The persona drops its performance. The shadow stops hijacking desire, and the self starts choosing what keeps you whole after the kiss. Intensity can be beautiful, but intimacy is what stays. It's the slow, steady knowing, I am safe to be all of me here. That's not less romantic. It's real, and real love is what finally lasts. When you look back, you realize awakening never gave you new beliefs. It quietly took away everything that wasn't true. It didn't make you someone else. It brought you home to who you've always been. Carl Jung called this process individuation, the slow, lifelong movement toward wholeness. Not perfection, not enlightenment, but integration, where the persona softens, the shadow is seen, and the deeper self begins to guide your life from within. Every quitting along the way was never about loss. It was preparation. When you stopped chasing approval, inner worth appeared. When you stopped rejecting your darkness, light found you naturally. When you stopped forcing purpose, presence became enough. When you stopped performing happiness, truth began to breathe. when you stopped blaming. You finally felt power in your hands again when you stopped trying to wake everyone up. Peace replaced the noise, and when you stopped feeling separate, love quietly took its rightful place. This is what Jung meant when he said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." That's the real awakening, not an escape from humanity, but a return to it. If you're in that silent stage right now, where everything familiar is falling away, please know you're not breaking, you're transforming, you're shedding the layers that kept you from yourself. And if these words found you at the right time, stay close. We explore these inner transformations here with every new upload, so kindly subscribe. Join the growing circle of souls who are walking the same quiet road toward wholeness. Share your experience below, because someone out there might need to hear your story. Until then, stay gentle with yourself. The world doesn't need a perfect you. It just needs the real you, and that's who you're becoming.